on the life of the Prophet Muhammad. There are so many that we could use and so many things that we could illustrate our examples with from the life of Prophet Muhammad. In fact, I do encourage everybody to get hold of a good, authentic life history of the Prophet Muhammad written by a Muslim and read it for yourself. And I am sure that if you are sincere and you are honest to yourself, that you will be convinced that this man is a messenger of God. But I want to take only a few examples. The first example I want to take is in the early days of Islam, when the Prophet Muhammad had begun preaching his message, and the pagan Arabs, the leaders of pagan Arabian society, began to realize that the message of Islam was not going to go away. In fact, more and more people were becoming Muslim. And many of them were slaves and women, the most downtrodden and exploited people in society. And they began to see that Islam had the potential to upset their whole social structure and their status quo and their control over society. So they came with a proposition to the Prophet Muhammad. This is the leaders of the pagan Arabs. They said, look, if you want to be our king, if what you desire by calling people to this religion is to be our king, we will make you our king. If what you desire is money, then we will make you the richest man amongst us. If you desire women, name whatever women that you wish, and we will take the most beautiful women of Quraysh and marry them to you. And if you are suffering from some illness or from some disease that you say this spirit comes and talks to you, we will spend any amount of money and do whatever we can until you are cured from this illness. So if we really think about this offer that was made by the pagan Arabs to Prophet Muhammad, every possible worldly motivation is there. Do you want to be the king? In other words, if the Prophet Muhammad is seeking to be a ruler and to be king, they'll say, we'll make you our king. You want to be rich? If that's your motivation, we'll give you money. You want women? We'll give you whatever women you like. You have some problem, you have some disease, we will spend whatever it takes until it is cured. What is there? What worldly offer is not contained in this offer? It's all there. If the Prophet Muhammad was motivated by any worldly needs or by any worldly desire, he could have accepted their offer and it would have been satisfied. So what was his reply? His reply to his uncle is famous. In one of the books of Seerah it is mentioned that, oh my uncle, if you give me the sun in one hand and the moon in the other, I will never leave off calling to this message. Or in another time he said to his uncle that I cannot abandon calling to this religion and to this message any more than you could take a torch and light it from the sun. So clearly, the Prophet Muhammad was not motivated by worldly desires. And we have to again pose the question, is this the manner of a liar? Is this the manner of a deluded person? Then another amazing incident that we want to narrate is when the Prophet Muhammad first publicly called people to Islam. A truly remarkable thing happened. He stood on the top of a mount of a particular hill in Mecca called Mount Safa. And traditionally, this was a place where if Mecca was being attacked, someone would go and stand on the top of this hill and shout a warning to the people that the city was being attacked. So the Prophet Muhammad went to the top of this mountain and started shouting and calling the people. So the people came, and all of the tribes, everybody came, and if the leader of the tribe did not come, they sent a representative. And so when the people were gathered in front of him, the Prophet Muhammad started calling the various tribes of Mecca by name. Oh, tribe of such and such. Oh, tribe of this and that. Calling the different tribes. And then he said, I have come to warn you of a terrible punishment from your Lord. I have come to warn you of a terrible punishment from your Lord. When one of the uncles of Prophet Muhammad heard this, his name was Abu Lahab, he started insulting the Prophet. He started cursing the Prophet Muhammad. May your face be rubbed in the dust. Is this what you wasted our time for, Muhammad? For this? You wasted our time for this? We could have been earning money in the marketplace and you wasted our time for this? And this is when some verses of the Quran were revealed. These verses of the Quran are very well there. It's one of the short chapters at the end of the Quran. Tabat yada abi lahabin wa tab. But very briefly, that's not the whole chapter, but what the meaning of this chapter is that this small verse of the Quran is saying that you, Abu Lahab, and your wife, you are going to be in the hellfire because of your persistent disbelief. Now, Abu Lahab was a character that whatever the Prophet Muhammad said, this man would contradict it. In fact, when the Prophet Muhammad used to go and try and teach the people and talk to them about Islam, Abu Lahab would follow behind him, and then he would warn the people and say, this man is a liar, this man is trying to misguide you, don't listen to him, will you abandon the religion of your ancestors, and so on and so forth. So every time the Prophet was trying to call the people to the beauty of the worship of the one God, to this true religion, this man would contradict him. But all this man, Abu Lahab, ever needed to do to almost demolish Islam was to testify that there is only one God, Allah, and that Muhammad was the messenger. And then he could say, well, I'm a Muslim now, but what are you going to do with this verse of Quran that says that I'm going to be in the hellfire and that I will die a disbeliever? But for 10 years, these verses of the Quran and this Abu Lahab existed side by side. But he could never take this testimony of faith. Would a liar behave like that? Would someone who is inventing something begin with such a dangerous challenge? People who are lying and people who are deceivers, they're usually very careful and manipulative in the way in which they deal with things. But these verses of the Quran show the complete honesty and the complete sincerity and the forthrightness of this message of Islam. Believe in Allah and His Messenger, or you will face a terrible punishment from Allah. And when this man Abu Lahab protests and he starts insulting, then these verses come from God to the Prophet Muhammad. You are going to suffer eternally for your disbelief. This is not a very, if you were a conniving person, lying and deceiving, I don't think this is the way that you would think of starting your message, because then the man would say, but actually I was really thinking about becoming Muslim and I wanted to embrace Islam, and you would look really a fool. So we see that, and this is what we mean, is that when you're looking at the life and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, you do not find the characteristics of a deceiver and of a liar. Yet when we go and we examine the Quran, we find all this knowledge, all this information, that even some of these things scientists have only begun to discover today. It's truly remarkable. Now there's one final incident I want to mention that is really, again, a very strong and very clear illustration that the Prophet Muhammad must have been a messenger from God. And this is some later time in Medina. The Prophet Muhammad had a son. The son, his name was Ibrahim, and the Prophet Muhammad, of course, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, you know, he longed for a son, and he had this beautiful son. His name was Ibrahim. But when Ibrahim was 6 months old, just 6 months old, this baby died actually in the arms of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, on the very same day which the son, the child of the Prophet Muhammad had died, there was an eclipse of the sun. So imagine that. The Prophet Muhammad's son dies, and the very same day there is an eclipse of the sun. And I'm sure there's many people, even right now, who would say, that's it for me. If there was an eclipse of the sun on the same day that his son died, he must be a prophet of God. You would think of it that it's a type of proof. And in fact, in those days, when people were very superstitious, they started running out of the buildings. They had heard that the Prophet Muhammad's son had died, and now they were seeing an eclipse of the sun, and they started coming out of their houses saying, look, even the sun darkens for the death of the child of Prophet Muhammad. So this is what the people were saying. Now imagine, If you had been spending so many years lying to people, trying to fool them about this thing, you would say, you see, I told you, the thing I've been telling you all along, you see, it's a proof from God. And if you were deluded, you would be thinking, yes, this is a sign from God to show that I'm a messenger. But what did Prophet Muhammad do? He called the people and he said to them, and when he called them, he assembled them in front of them, he said, this is just the sun and the moon. And they are from the natural ayat of God, the natural processes that God has made. And the sun and moon does not eclipse or rise or set for the death or the birth of any man. So when you see this, pray to your Lord. Is this the words of a deluded person? Are these the words of a liar? No. These are the words of a man who was exactly and truly what he claimed to be, the last and final messenger of God, was brought the guidance for the peace and the benefits of all humanity until the day of judgment. And this is what we invite you to, based upon your reason and your understanding, that you can think and examine and look, read the Quran, study the life of the Prophet Muhammad, be sincere and be honest, and we feel sure that you will be convinced that there is indeed nothing worthy of worship except the one God, the Creator, Allah, and that Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, is the last and final messenger from Allah. May God's peace and blessings be upon you all. And